Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and I am here with the Cliff Notes version of the hearing that took place today in regards to the United States versus Robert Sylvester Kelly. You guys know there was a hearing that was supposed to take place on February 17th, but that hearing was rescheduled to today. It was a pretty short hearing. It lasted about 20 minutes, 22 minutes, around that time frame. And on the call was Judge Donnelly, the Elizabeth Gettys, and I'm sure there's two other ladies that are typically on the call with her. And then for the defense was Steve Greenberg, Mike Leonard, and then R.Kelly was on the call, although once he said hello to the judge, they did not acknowledge him anymore during the call. Not even when the call was ending did they ask him if he had any questions or concerns. Greenberg and Leonard did all the talking. And I think it's sad that, this is his life that's on the line, his freedom that's in jeopardy. And they basically just want to know if he was on the call, didn't care if he had any questions, any objections, any concerns. They didn't care if he understood what was being, what was transpiring, what decisions were being made, in regards to his case. And so I'm sure that before the call, Greenberg pretty much went down the list and told him what was going to be said on the call or what they were going to discuss, but to just not even ask for his input, ask if he understood the decisions that they were making in terms of his life, I thought, was kind of tacky, trashy, and, dismissive of him as a human being with certain rights. And so the first order of business that took place on the call was as expected, and as I stated in my videos last week, that this trial was not going to take place in April. And so that was the case. Okay, so Judge Donnelly, states that, she didn't believe or didn't believe that they would be able to have the trial in April, due to the COVID pandemic and certain things that were transpiring. So one being the COVID outbreak at the MCC. And I will tag my video from last week where I talked about a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit that's being started in regards to the handling of COVID at the MCC in Chicago. Two inmates started that lawsuit. And so you can watch that video. I'll put the link above. And then she talked about quarantine rules that are in effect for the state of New York and for, their location, where people need to be quarantined for 14 days once they enter New York, that, they need to be tested and then retested. And so the government, is stating that they have 50 witnesses, I believe, that they need to get to New York. And so those people, will have to quarantine for 14 days, do the testing. And so they need time to arrange for all of this to take place, which should have already been in effect if you had set a date for April. And then she talked about the fact that there are no vaccine provisions for court personnel. And so on the list of people, who need to get a vaccine, who need to be offered the COVID vaccine, personnel, judges, law clerks, deputies, bailiffs, people that are in and out of the courthouse, that there's no provisions for them to get the vaccine if they wanted or to make it mandatory that they be vaccinated. And then she talked about, the Chicago trial date, and, if they have to change the New York trial date, how does that impact the Chicago trial date? And so I think I mentioned this in another video. For some reason, it is important that this New York case goes first. And I believe that whatever happens with that New York case is going to determine what happens with the Chicago state case and the Chicago federal case. I just feel it in my spirit, okay, that there is something about this New York case that will drive whether or not he goes on trial in Chicago at the state level and at the federal level based on what happens with this New York case. So then they moved over to the discovery issue. And so remember, they were supposed to turn over the discovery on Friday, February 5th. And there was some concern about who would be able to see the discovery, whether or not Mr. Kelly would be able to take paper copies back into his cell. They were worried that, the information on this discovery, witnesses' names, and that type of stuff was going to get out. And remember, this is the 3500 discovery, which basically deals with witnesses and government witnesses and that type of thing. It's not, the other discovery that goes along with the case, which they have already received. And I know a lot of people think that they are withholding the discovery from the defense, but that is not the case, because if you go back to when I read the formal indictment when he was first arrested and charged in the summer of last year, it gave a list of the evidence that they claim to have, and so the defense already has that information. What they were receiving on last week was actually witness statements, witness lists, witness testimony that was given at the grand jury or to the prosecutors when they were interviewed. And so this is just another phase of discovery that they're going through. And so they, once again said that they have 50 witnesses that they're planning to bring in for the New York case. Now, who these 50 witnesses are, it is probably people, that they have offered deals to in exchange for their testimony. It is the alleged victims in the case, minus Aaliyah, who, unfortunately is no longer with us. It is law enforcement, whatever Homeland Security or FBI agents, that went out and got information, interviewed people. So it doesn't mean that 50 people that are known to R.Kelly are witnesses in this case. This is everybody. This is law enforcement, federal agents, past employees. And I would say that when it all is said and done, it's probably less than 20 people that he actually know that will be testifying against him. And it also could be people, verifying that the phone records that they have, are legitimate, people with, who were able to get into email addresses and that type of thing. And so one of the things that they talked about with the discovery, because the judge did come back, I read to you guys the motions between the prosecution and Mike Leonard as they were going back and forth about who can see the discovery, when the discovery needs to be returned, who, how is it going to be handled? Will R. Kelly get paper copies, or will it be information on a disc, that type of thing? And the judge did come back, I believe it was later Friday or Thursday evening. She came back with a quick response, and she basically took the motion that I read to you guys from the prosecution and basically just redlined a couple of things, like instead of him only being able to get a compact disc, he can get paper copies in his jail cell. They talked about, the transfer of the information. So she basically gave everybody what they wanted, and just tweaked the actual motion and just marked out and changed the verbiage on it. So it basically is seen as a win for the defense, the changes that she allowed. So then they got into the discussion about who can see the 3500 discovery material on the defense side. And so they said that they want Nicole, they said an attorney from Michigan. We all know that that's Nicole. So they want Nicole to be able to see the discovery, and then they want an assistant attorney that works in Mike Leonard's office and one that works in Steve Greenberg's office. They want them to be allowed to see the information. And then of course they have like staff people, that work with them that will probably be able to see it as well. So the discussion went to whether or not Nicole should be able to see it, because she is only on the state case and she's not listed as, having a notice of appearance, which means that she is an attorney on the case that has all the privileges of being an attorney on the case, as well as, holding her accountable for the rules that go into place. So basically, if they allow her to see this information and then she breaks the rules that were set forth in the motion signed by the judge, if she's not on record as an attorney in the case, then they can't hold her accountable for any rules that she breaks. They can hold Steve and Mike Leonard accountable for giving her the information, but they can't, enter any sanctions against her for breaking the rules. So, Judge Donnelly seemed to be open to the fact that Nicole, if she's working on the case, helping them behind the scenes on the federal case, she didn't seem to have a problem with Nicole having access. But, for legitimate purposes, she said that it would just be easier for Nicole to file a notice of appearance on the case. But if that's not something she wants to do for whatever reason, she wanted the defense team as well as the prosecution to get together and work it out, figure out how to get this information to Nicole, let her view the information, and make her responsible to any sanctions that come along with her having access to this information. And so I don't know why Nicole doesn't want to be on record. Maybe there's a reason, I don't know, but it seems to me that it would be easier for her to just become an attorney on the case. And then I want to stick a pin here, because Texas Black Diamond, who's another YouTuber that's covering the case, she pointed out that back on October of last year, that the attorney of record for Doug Anton was terminated. And, she's under the belief that Doug Anton is no longer on the case. He's been terminated from the case. And I'm still not sure that is, the actual thing that happened. He may have been removed as an attorney on the case, as someone who can go to court, someone who can, negotiate, be at the trial, sit at the trial desk and all that stuff, for various reasons. And I only say that because on his Facebook page, he is still talking about the R.Kelly case. But for whatever reason, he's listed as terminated. That doesn't mean that he's terminated from the defense team. It just means that he's terminated from being an attorney of record, meaning that he has certain privileges when it comes to the case. And that could be for a number of reasons. I don't know. Okay, so I can't get into why that would have happened, but terminating him from, the notice of attorney does not necessarily mean that he's not working on the case, because as we see, Nicole is not a attorney technically on the federal cases, but she's still helping them behind the scenes. So then we move on and go to Greenberg. And so he had one other issue about the 3500 discovery, because it stated that all of the 3500 discovery had to be returned to the prosecution 10 days following the conclusion of the trial. And so Greenberg is arguing that in the event that they have to file appeals, then they shouldn't have to return the discovery within 10 days at the end of the original trial, that they should be able to keep any documents that they received, any 3500 documents, until any appeals have been exhausted. And then he also went on to say that it is customary and a part of his legal office that they retain copies of all information for all cases that they handled. And so he wanted to address that. And then the Elizabeth Geddes lady, who is the lead prosecutor, says that she has no problem with them keeping the information until all appeals have been exhausted, if that is the case. But they would need to have a conversation, like a sidebar, regarding him keeping the files permanently, as part of his oh God, what do they call it when you keep stuff? I can't think of the official word for it, but for him keeping permanent records of, all the information on the 3500 discovery. So then Judge Donnelly moved on to the Brady rule. So you guys know I have said in a couple of videos that Ann Donnelly sent out that letter about the Brady rule to every defendant, okay, for every case that she's handling. She sent it to, the Three Stooges, Don Russell, Richard Arline, Michael Williams. They all have it on their cases. Even with the Tim Norman case that I'm following, they have those letters. Okay, everybody got the letter but R.Kelly. He didn't get the letter, y'all. Not in the Eastern District of New York. He got it in the Chicago case. The Illinois case, he didn't get it in this case. So I don't know if Judge Donnelly is listening to our commentary or what, but she said that she wasn't sure if she did it, but if she didn't, she was going to do it today. So she read the notice, telling the prosecution that they have to turn over this discovery, blah, blah, blah. And then she went on to add an addendum saying that whether she sent the letter or said it during a previous hearing, that it still applies. Okay, so nobody's trying to get over on the defense, that the prosecution know what their obligations are. She knows what the obligation is, and that it is merely a formality that she reads that order about the Brady rule. So that has been taken care of. So then Elizabeth Geddes goes on and says that she has additional scheduling matters that she wants to talk about. And she was basically saying that since they're moving the case from April to August, and I think I forgot to mention earlier when I first started talking about they were going to move the case, they decided on a tentative date of August 9th. It's not written in stone, so it still may not take place in August. So at this point, Elizabeth Geddes is saying that if they are going to start the trial on August 9th, that's actually when the questionnaires, would be taken into consideration, when the potential jurors would be called in and do the questionnaire. And so the trial wouldn't actually start until August 11th. And so Steve Greenberg has said August 6th. So they've been talking about this behind the scenes and had already, made this decision, which is why I say I'm sure he had already talked to R.Kelly about what was going to be discussed on this call. So she points out to Greenberg that August 6th is a Friday. And so it should start on August 9th with the questionnaires, and then they would be ready to go to trial on August 11th. So they're thinking that it's not going to take a long time to seat a jury based on the questionnaire and the questions that they are going to ask the potential jurors, that they should be able to impanel a jury pretty quickly. And so then they went on to talk about whether or not the defense should be present during the distribution of the questionnaires. Greenberg says that he doesn't think that they need to be there, and he says that he's accustomed to the jury being in the jury room. They hand out the questionnaires, and then they provide, like, once the people complete the questionnaires, sign off on them, that they then provide the questionnaires to the defense. So first of all, Greenberg, we need you to understand, the trial is in New York. You are in Chicago. You need to have your butt in New York when they pass out those questionnaires, and you need to be in the room. And Judge Donnelly, politely pointed out that there is usually an introduction of the defense and prosecution to the potential jurors, like where they'll tell them who they are, basically, and that, they are entrusting them to be fair and impartial, and that, they are going to uphold their duty as an open-minded juror. So I'm not understanding why Steve Greenberg is not trying to be at this jury selection, but Judge Donnelly wants him to be there. And so then they decide, that they'll discuss it, behind the scenes, and then Greenberg will let them know, or the prosecution and the judge will discuss it behind the scenes, and then they'll let Greenberg know what they come up with as the formal procedure for jury selection. And then I don't think we ever got a ruling on, the concerns that Greenberg pointed out about the jury selection and the jury questionnaire and the sequestered, because remember, he filed another motion about the sequestered jury. And so I need to go back out there and check and see if Ann Dunley ever responded to that. So then they went on to talk more about, the difficulties of arranging travel for the witnesses that they expect to come in for the trial. And this is where they wanted to set, a tentative date of August 11th for the trial to start. And, this would give them time to start allowing the government to be able to arrange for travel, the 14-day quarantine, where they're going to be housed, the transportation to and from the courthouse, and that type of thing. And so Greenberg said that he was okay with that, and then he suggested that the next status hearing take place in April. And I really couldn't tell if they said April 15th or April 16th, but it'll be one of those days. And it will either be at 11 or 11:30. They were kind of far away from the microphone, so it was a little muffled, but it will be posted. And so we will have that information on when the next status hearing is. And so that concluded the call. And I just felt, as I already mentioned, I kind of felt for R.Kelly that he just wasn't even acknowledged beyond, is he on the call? And he says, yes, Your Honor, I'm here. They didn't acknowledge him again throughout that entire call. They didn't bring up the fact that this means that he will have been in jail for more than 2 years by the start of this trial, which doesn't seem like it is actually going to start in August. I just didn't like I don't know, it's like they were talking about tea, what's the best tea on the menu, instead of this man's life and the seriousness of what's going on. I would think that Greenberg or Leonard would have piped up and said, okay, now if this is going to be delayed another 8 months, then we need to get my client out on bond. None of that was brought up. I mean, even if she was going to shoot it down or basically say, file a motion and I'll look at it, they just didn't argue for a quicker trial. They didn't argue, he needs to be released. Like, even if you're just pretending to care, show some concern. And so that just really, really, really ruffled my feathers. And you guys know I have zero confidence in Greenberg, to handle this case. But, I will be the first one to apologize if he is able to get Mr. Kelly off. But at the current moment, I'm just not feeling Greenberg. So I have rambled on long enough. This was supposed to be the Cliff Notes version. So I am going to go ahead and end this now. You guys go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.